Hello, folks. Welcome back to English 102. This is a video lecture for CRN 21940, 21971, and 21972. And this particular video lecture will cover information for Module 2, which is comprises Essay 2 over the broad topic of privacy, and that is due March 21st. You can find that either in the home page of our course or in the module for itself in Canvas. And so I am currently making this video lecture, right, for essay number 2. If you were to click this link here about the essay guide, you will find this document, which we will look at in a moment. And if you click this link here that says use any of these files, you will be taken to a folder in our Google Drive. And all of these images and PDF files, readings, there are even some videos in here and, graphics and whatnot. They're all available for you to use as sources in essay number 2, of course, depending on which topic you choose. And they're all listed here in alphabetical order in the list view. Remember, if you toggle this button in the upper right-hand corner from grid to list, you will be able to see them easily in this folder called Essay 2 and Privacy, because there's all of our course folders there. Okay, so I'm going to remind you that aside from it being due on March 21st, essay number 2, like essay number 1, is the exact same outline. That is to say, the outline you will craft or compose or follow or your essay number 2 should be the exact same one that you use, or is the exact same one you should use for essay number 1 and 2, 3, and 4 throughout the entire semester. So this is what it looks like, 6 meaty paragraphs comprising a minimum of 3 double-spaced pages. Speaking of which, minimum double-spaced pages, I'm just going to remind you, it says here very clearly, before submitting, follow and apply this checklist. If you click this link, it will take you to a document inside of our Google Drive. And there are 35 questions here, one of which is number 23, I believe. 21. Says, does my body text meet the required minimum of 3, not 2.5, not or 2 3/4 double-spaced pages, excluding any tables or illustrations that may appear in the body text? So a minimum of 3 double-spaced pages. And I say that because I noticed that a number of you did not meet the minimum length requirement for essay number 1, and that is not good for your grade. Everyone should be writing the same amount. Okay, on page 1 here, this essay guide is the outline, the same one for essay number 2 and essay number 1. And on page 2 here are topics. And I think there's 10 topics here. You can choose one of these. And they're all fairly widely ranging. And I'm going to go through a couple in a little bit of detail here in a moment. But I first want to provide a little kind of context and background, if you will, for this overarching topic of privacy. So um, it's only been, fairly recently, if you look at this chronology here, um, that the kind of technology we carry around with us all of the time, the smartphone as it's called, is very, very recent in terms of technological advancement. So I and many of your parents and certainly your grandparents grew up with, what we would call a rotary phone, right? Or even a landline cord phone. It wasn't until the early 1980s that we started to see digital information as opposed to analog information. So as you can see here, from roughly 1996 to the early 20th first century, it hasn't been that long in our human history that we've made exponential advances in technology. Roughly speaking, the internet as we know it, beginning with the first browser, Netscape and AOL, began around 1995, 96. Then we progressed to Palm Pilots, very kind of elementary digital phones, then flip phones, and phones that can take pictures, and then started having apps and the BlackBerry and so on, to eventually what we know now of as smartphones and tablets and devices. I mention this because this rapid, if I go back to this image here, this rapid kind of increase of technology is not always for the best, right? Like, we think, oh, great, I have the ability to store on this little compact disc here, a bunch of songs, or I have the ability to store all of this information on a tablet or a smartphone device, email and messages and videos and pictures and, all of my banking information and whatnot. Okay, that's a matter of convenience, but what problems could arise if you have that information all in one place? And so it brings up this issue of what we know as scientific ethics. And I pose this issue because, as you can see here, this is the frontispiece or image facing the title page of the 1831 edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a novel that I periodically teach. It was first published in 1818. But the real, arguably, real gist of this novel is not about, as you may have seen around Halloween or in various horror flicks, about, scary monsters. In fact, he's typically called the creature in the novel. Instead, it is about whether or not the doctor, this guy right here, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, whether or not he should in fact reanimate the body parts of what becomes the creature. So he does, and what happens is he is, as you can see from this image, horrified at what has come alive, and he ends up abandoning his creation. So the creature, if you haven't read the novel, I highly recommend it. It's nothing like the films that you may have seen of Frankenstein. It's a much better read. And so the creature understandably becomes miserable and angry at his abandonment, like any child would be, and ends up learning from human beings and wreaking havoc on them to get back at his creator, Victor Frankenstein. So just keep in mind, Frankenstein is not the the creature, but Frankenstein, as you can see down here, is the name of the creator of the creature, the doctor. So I bring this point to bear on whether or not we should create all of these technological advances, right? So they're all, again, convenient, kind of entertaining and whatnot. But we haven't, as a human species, thought much beyond, well, what happens when we make all of this information available, or when we, provide a minor, a child with a phone like this, right? So essay number 2 in broad terms is about this complicated issue of privacy. And on page 2, again, I've broken it down into various kinds of topics. And they're all, as you can see, pretty much in the argumentative format of should, which means that you take a side, yes or no, or it depends on what degree. So number 1, for example, if this interested you, should we rethink using facial recognition software because it reveals implicit racial bias? Well, it's well known now, but it wasn't, at the start of facial recognition usage, that facial recognition algorithms, which are simply, mathematical codes or equations, they are biased against people of color because more often than not, the computer scientists who are writing these algorithms are not people of color. And so it often makes errors in its algorithmic responses or results and causes people of color to often be misidentified in issues of crime or other nefarious activities. So should we maybe pull back from that? And there's a document in here, in your folder, that is from the FBI. I try to give you guys legitimate, authentic sources, and this is from 2019. And it's about the application, really, in the FBI of information technology. This is only a few years ago. And just scroll down here a bit. In this document, it says, remember, the FBI, the chief law enforcement agency of the Department of Justice that we as taxpayers pay for. It says FBI policy defines probe photos, when they're probing in a case, probe photos as facial photos lawfully obtained pursuant to an authorized criminal investigation. FBI policy prohibits the submission of photos of individuals exercising rights guaranteed by the First Amendment. For example, lawful assembly, which we would call a protest with signs or whatever, that's protected under the First Amendment, unless pertinent to and within the scope of an authorized law enforcement activity. So that if law enforcement needs to form a barricade or prevent, supposed radical liberals from protesting at a rally or something, or, a Black Lives Matter event, then if law enforcement, views that within their scope of activity, then yeah, they can take pictures of you or us. This policy also prohibits submission of photos collected as a result of a search in violation of the Fourth Amendment. So, Fourth Amendment being the amendment that allows for us to be protected against unlawful search and seizure. Speaking of which, I might go back to that point about Fourth Amendment sure I have it in here. There's an entire interview about the Fourth Amendment in the folder, but let me just show you the text of the Fourth Amendment. That is the language. So I'm just going to increase the size here a bit. All right, so this is the Fourth Amendment, the actual wording. There it is in handwritten form. Let's just break this down a bit. The right, and this is a very convoluted late 18th century grammatical structure. So the right is the subject, right there is the subject, and then the verb is way over here, shall not be violated. Okay, so there's this long series of prepositional phrases in between the right shall not be violated. The right of the people to be secured in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. So that's the basic gist of the amendment. And no warrants shall issue, meaning no judge or magistrate shall give out a warrant except or but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation by the law enforcement providing the evidence for a warrant, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. So, all right, this is your typical, prevention of law enforcement of just, having either a knock warrant or a no knock warrant, just breaking in and, searching your place. But what's under question here in regards to privacy is the listing here. So persons means your physical body, houses, obviously, dwellings, papers, your documents, and then effects. So effects here is a really broad term. It means, the artifacts, the things, the possessions that you have. Well, in the early 21st century now, we have these technological devices called smartphones and tablets and computers that contain a lot of information. So should law enforcement, for example, have the right to seize and search that information? So I just wanted to point that out because when we're talking here about, when it says the policy of, photos, facial photos, the policy also prohibits submission of photos collected as a result of a search in violation of the Fourth Amendment, meaning, if they're searching a house, and they happen across some photos that aren't really part of the investigation, right? They cannot be submitted to this facial photo recognition program. And then it goes on to say the automated facial recognition algorithm. So remember, again, it's not a bunch of people, human beings, like you might have in a regular classic lineup, looking at faces. It's a set of, coding that goes through very, very rapidly a catalog, a data bank of people's faces, right? The automated facial recognition algorithm in the NGI-PS compares the probe photo against the mugshots in the chromo identity group in order to find candidate photos. The algorithm, again, not really humans, uses pattern matching approaches, very kind of vague description, developed within the field of computer vision to identify people in photographs and their facial appearance. However, as I'm pointing out with question number one or topic number one, we know for a fact that there are problems with inherent biases against people of color in this kind of algorithmic use of facial photo recognition. So maybe we need to rethink it and retool it before we start applying it vastly like we already started doing. The next topic, I'm not going to go through all 10 here. I don't have time. And you don't have time. Is a fairly recent issue that I wanted to bring to your attention. And if you click this link here, it'll take you to a relatively short YouTube video by, as you can see here, the Washington Post. So the Washington Post, if you don't know, received its kind of World Hall of Fame with the Watergate story that it broke, that eventually led to former President Richard Nixon's resignation, right? So along with the New York Times, the Washington Post in Washington, D.C. Is considered one of the world's top journal and newspaper outlets, right? So journalism, outfits. So this video, though, explains, you can see here, it's fairly recent, last summer, about this company called NSO Group that is based in in Israel. So here is what the question asks: should the Israeli company NSO or NSO Group, which produces the Pegasus spyware that secretly hacks phone users around the globe, should it be held liable for invading privacy of innocent citizens? So if you're interested in this, I want to go learn more about it, there's this video, but also inside of the folder, there is this article about it. Again, fairly recently, last summer. And, one of the reasons we at Grambling now have a Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity, as you can see here, this is a cybersecurity expert, Banu Kiran Gurijala. And I don't, provide you with lame or weak sources. If you go down to the articles, and as most articles have, this is not only published in Scientific American, which is a top-notch publication in the United States, has been for a long time, but as you can see here, this is a legit person. He teaches computer science at West Virginia University as a cybersecurity expert. So this is who's writing this piece, again, fairly recently. So this program called Pegasus is pretty phenomenal, and we're just now learning about it. Says here, the company's flagship product, talking about the NSO Group, the company's flagship product is Pegasus spyware that can stealthily enter a smartphone and gain access to everything on it, including its camera and microphone. Pegasus is designed to infiltrate devices running Android, BlackBerry, iOS, meaning iPhone, and Symbian operating systems, and turn them into surveillance devices. So right there, that's kind of the whole universe of pretty much 99% of what people carry around, whether you're in India, China, or the United States. Since 2019, so fairly recently, Pegasus users, and the users are not us, but they are countries or states, governments around the globe that have bought this software, this spying surveillance program from NSO Group in Israel. So just, again, the video explains all this, but very quickly, in Israel, there's a company called NSO Group. It produces this spying surveillance software, and it sells it to very specific targeted international governments, including, apparently, I recently learned, the United States. Continuing, so Pegasus users, government states, have been able to install the software on smartphones with a missed call on WhatsApp, and can even delete the record of the missed call, make it impossible for the phone's owner to know anything is amiss. Remember, this is by a cybersecurity expert at West Virginia University. Another way is by simply sending a message to a user's phone that produces no identification. This means that the latest version of this spyware does not require the smartphone user to do anything. All that is required for a successful spyware attack and installation is having a particular vulnerable app or operating system installed on the device. This is known as a zero-click exploit. Again, you can use any of this information in your essay number 2 if you choose this topic. Once installed, Pegasus, the program, can theoretically harvest any data from the device and transmit it back to the attacker or government, Russia or China, whoever's attacking your phone. It can steal photos and videos, recordings, location records, communications, web searches, passwords, call logs, and social media posts. It also has the capability to activate cameras and microphones for real-time surveillance without the permission or knowledge of the user. Wow. And other ways your phone can be traced. Yeah, so let me go back to this point I was trying to make a moment ago. Let's see, that's CNET. So this is February 2022. And CNET, by the way, I don't know if you know that company, there's Washington Post again. Wow. So CNET has been around almost as long as the internet. It's a very reputable computer technology. Used to be in print, now it's print and online, of course. And so you can see here, this is February 22nd. And they have discovered that, the phones were on an activist organization's list of more than 50,000 phones for all of these kinds of people, right? So this is a, in case people don't know, the reason why, what is Pegasus? The reason why CNET is explaining it is because it's fairly new. It's only, a couple of years. And it's not on everyone's radar. So, you can go read about this, but it, right, the US cut off the company as a customer of US products. So we had been, as the United States, been buying this product from the NSO group, which should lead Americans to have concern that our own government is using this software to spy on this. So that's fundamentally what that question number 2 is about, is should they be held liable, right? Responsible for invading the privacy. It's kind of hard to detect, of course, but, or maybe should we retool that question and say, should the government, the State Department, the United States government be held liable for buying this nefarious spyware from a company in Israel? Pretty chilling. This kind of information really should remind us of another question here that takes us back. And this is number 7. So if you don't know about this guy, Edward Snowden, he's the one responsible for telling us really that the United States National Security Agency is the one spying on us and taking all of our information. So in 2013, he worked for the NSA, known as National Security Agency. And he discovered, because he had really top level computer access, that the NSA, the National Security Agency, was gathering troves and troves of information, not from supposed just terrorists, right, but from all of us. And that phone companies and media companies, Microsoft and Apple and Skype and Yahoo and Google and all of these tech companies were complicit and involved. That all turned into a firestorm when that information came out. In fact, during Obama's second term. And what happened was he ended up being held as a hostage, if you will, in Russia, and is there to this day, because he was, the trajectory was, speaking of which, let me just, if you're interested in writing on this, there's a kind of fascinating video that I would recommend if you watch it, that you do not watch it inside of Google here, but instead it's in our privacy folder. It's down at the very end here. It's called, as you can see at the bottom, United States of Secrets Part 2. So this is an entire documentary or movie, this right here. So I would recommend that you download it, which you can, and then watch it on your laptop or desktop. It's only about an hour or so, but it explains the backdrop of Snowden and the real kind of dire implications back as far as 2013 of just how severe and pervasive these US violations of our own privacy have been. So this question asked is, should he be extradited from Russia? Because he's currently being held there. And the reason why is because when he copied the information from the NSA, as the movie explains, he went into immediate hiding because he was going to share the information with journalists. But he knew that as soon as he was found to have the information, the NSA would track him down no matter where he was. So he flew from Hawaii, where he was, to Hong Kong. And of course, the NSA was hot on his heels there. And once he was in Hong Kong, he then wanted to fly to Ecuador, to South America. But he had a layover, a connecting flight in Moscow, Russia. But as soon as he left Hong Kong and landed in Russia, during that time he was in the air, the United States State Department, our government, revoked his passport. And of course, you cannot travel internationally if you do not have an active passport. So he has been in Russia since 2013. And he's still alive. He periodically gives interviews. You can YouTube him. It was, again, is because of him that we even knew about this. But there was only because he had, really top secret clearance access to all of this nefarious activity that our own government is doing to us. So should he be extradited, that is brought back from Russia? And should he be tried as a traitor under what's called the Espionage Act? It's a real thing. So It's called the Espionage Act of 1917 because that's when we entered World War I. And espionage, think of the word spy. It's a French word. Espionage, it's the act of spying. This is an actual law that you can be tried for treason against the United States government if you're found to have violated this law. Okay, all right. So it hasn't been used very often, but people in the federal government want to bring Snowden back to the US and try him under the Espionage Act for selling, not selling, but giving, copying secret, confidential, top secret information of the federal government, the NSA, and giving it to journalists to say, hey, look, America, here's what your government is doing to you. Or should he be allowed to be returned to the United States and protected under the whistleblower laws? Remember, a whistleblower is someone who, of course, like a referee on the field, is calling a foul. And there is, in fact, certain protections in the United States that allow you to not be persecuted and prosecuted for calling a violation of your employer, or in this case, the federal government. And, because if we didn't have something like this, then people would never speak out. We would live in a kind of fascist dictatorial state like China or the former Soviet Union, or maybe even current Russia. So there's that question, which is kind of the background. And again, if you're going to answer number 7, I highly recommend you watch that video, which you can paraphrase or quote as a source. So here's another possible question topic. Should teens, those 17 and under in Louisiana, be subject, or whatever state you happen to be in, but Grambling in Louisiana, be subject to trial in court, a fine up to $500,000, house arrest, and or register as a sex offender for sending and or receiving underage photos on digital devices commonly known as sexting, should that happen. And many of you might think, what? Like, that actually happens? It does. And there's a couple of articles in here in your here's one by Lithwick in your folder that account for some actual real life instances. This is from a US news article a while back. So teens, nude photos, and the law, right? So it begins with a hypothetical, like, should your principal, if you're in, say, junior high, should they call the parents, or the boys' parents, or the girls' parents, or the police, and they find, nude photos on either or both of your cell phones? And as it says here, more and more the answer is all the above, that they're calling the police. And then it lists several actual cases of underage, boys and girls that have been prosecuted for this. And in Louisiana, there is in fact a law, as you can see here, Louisiana. There's a law that prohibits sexting, right? That is the sending or receiving of material for anyone who's under 18, because, let's remember that in no state in the United States in fact, most of the countries around the world, is nudity, child pornography allowable. So what constitutes child pornography? Well, people who are 17 or younger, so, under the age of 18, and showing, genitals and or nudity can be described as child pornography. So this addresses under sending and receiving is, even though you may not have asked for a nude photo and you're in junior high, but your boyfriend or girlfriend or whomever sends you a nude photo of someone who is under 18, then you have, on your phone, you're now possessing technically child pornography, right? So the question asks, should you be subject to all of these, fines or imprisonment, right? And it depends, of course, on the state. As you can see from this chart here, this is a bit dated now. This is June 2019, but it's the most recent one I can find. You can see that's not a uniform, across the board in terms of laws, which is a question you could write on, a topic, should we enact a, federal law in all 50 states that every instance of sexting is treated exactly the same way uniformly, right? Like, you don't drive with a seatbelt in Louisiana is the same, misdemeanor moving violation as it is in California or Oregon or any other state. It's all a, same kind of traffic violation. But notice how many right here says under sexting laws, right? This first column, how many do not have sexting laws? How many states? It's quite a few. More and more since 2019 have actually been including sexting laws, including something known as sextortion. Excuse me. So that's just taking the word sex and extortion and making a portmanteau, or jamming them together, making a new word. So sextortion here by the National Council of State Legislatures a couple of years ago, 2019, talks about revenge porn and non-consensual pornography, but then using the either actual release or the potential release of that revenge porn or non-consensual pornography to extort money or actions, behavior from people. So, we should have, I would argue, in all 50 states, something that allows people to be treated fairly and equally, regardless of what state you're in, because, data travels across, the radio waves. Doesn't, it's not like a car driving. You can send a photo or video from New York to California. So notice here, this map shows you that states in orange, they ban revenge porn. So like, say, Louisiana is in orange there. But it does not also ban sextortion yet, anyway. Who knows if it will? Because in part, it's hard to nail down and define. States that are a little more on top of things and progressive, you might say, are states here in navy blue, California, Nevada, Idaho, and so on, even curiously Texas. But we still have a long way to go. States that have no law for revenge porn or either sextortion are, there's still a lot. And all of these are down here, the U.S. territories, Guam and Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and so on. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of question number 4. Should people who post revenge porn be subjected to fines and or imprisonment? Well, according to that, it depends on what state you're in. I would argue that yes, it should be, but here is the National Conference of State Legislatures. You can see that from the bottom here, which is, it's a collection, or not a collection, it's a group that confers annually, if not more than that, of all the state legislatures, right? They come together and they're trying to develop national policy, federal policy. So let's see another one. This number 6 here, should the NSA have the right to collect in bulk all of our personal information? That relates to the Edward Snowden issue that I talked about a moment ago, which they pretty much do, by the way. So whenever you, there's something called a EULA, that's how it's pronounced. It's called the End User License Agreement, or EULA, as you can see here. So you and I buying a tablet, a phone, a laptop, we are the end user, okay? And whenever you download an app, or whenever you update your phone, or whenever you buy a phone or activate a phone, you have to, as I'm sure you're aware, click on the agreement of the phone usage and the app usage. And most of us just kind of, click through that 50-something page legalese document and don't really think much about it. But in doing so, in providing your data, your personal information, perhaps even your location, depending on the app. The app is free often because you or I or we collectively are the product. What is being sold is our data, our information. And it's being sold to companies that do marketing and advertising, political groups even. So not being aware of, whenever, kind of, whether it's Snap or Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever, apps you're using these days, your information, your private information is being gathered, whether you like it or not, and being often sold to what are called third parties. So that's something that a third party let me just find, let's see if I can find, show you how to use the web. So I'm looking for a particular file type. That is, in this case, I want a PDF file. And so I'm going to say file type : PDF. Now I could do that down here in the format, right? Like I could choose that, but what I just did was I happen to know the command, so I just typed it in. So I'm searching, because if you said, look, I want a PowerPoint, document, right? You could look for a PowerPoint document. Anyway, so I'm looking for a PDF, and I want a EULA or perhaps an Apple device. Okay, here is, one for iTunes, for all kinds of different, let me see here. What about a health app? Well, let me go back to the, this one here, first one. So different languages, obviously, right? But just right up here, you can see how long this is. And in part, it's because there are different languages, right? But if I just choose English, of course, how many of you are really, reading this? Most of us are not, right? I don't want to. Don't show this. Well, so it's just, incredibly verbose in different languages. Let's see if I can find here. Spell. So here is what I was trying to show you. This phrase here, this term called third party. Third party refers to an unknown at this time company or entity. Okay, so in this case, Apple is one party. You or I, who's buying the phone or tablet or laptop or whatever device, is the second party. So first and second party, but the third party is, say, the app developer, or Microsoft, if you're installing Microsoft on an Apple product, or an advertiser, a marketer, any third party, including, it could be construed in legal terms, the federal government, right? They could be a third party. So that's what this one was asking about, is should we have all of our information be collected in bulk by these companies, which is currently still happening, right? I would argue no, but then, who's going to live in the early 21st century without a digital device? Yeah, pretty problematic. Voting with mobile apps, again, think of that information I just mentioned. You download an app and you hope it's safe and secure, but if a mobile app can be hacked into and it knows your political vote, can it change an election? But also, can it target a certain demographic of people, whether in a region or by gender, ethnicity, or race, right? Because a lot of people want to move to mobile apps, especially during an age of COVID, where they don't have to go to the voting polls. Yeah, it's a problem, because our right to vote should be anonymous. This right to be forgotten is also fairly new, and it asks, number 9, should individuals in the United States have the right to be forgotten, whereby an individual can request that Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine remove specific links to negative information about that person, or should such links to information remain on the internet permanently? And the removing of specific links is called delisting. So if we go to Google, Google is a search engine, not a search directory. And this is my homepage, right? So let's say, I don't know, I go to Canvas, right? There's Canvas. But if I click on the home button, you'll see that my home page is actually the advanced search page of Google. If you want to do the same thing, it's a very useful tool because I'm always looking for very specific information. You just, click this link and you copy it and paste it into your browser home setting. Anyhow, so this is the, advanced search page. If we go to the regular search page, most of you are familiar with the single search field, the basic search. If there is negative information about someone and they want it to be removed from public view, so to speak, not necessarily erased from the records, which is a different thing altogether, then especially, for example, in Europe, which they've already started doing, this right to be forgotten issue, they have, implemented it in the European Union, the EU, right? So that's what this question is asking you about. But should the, like here, this says, those in favor of the right to be forgotten cite it's necessarily due to issues such as revenge porn, right? So if you wanted to search a celebrity's leaked photos or videos or whatever, should that celebrity have the right to petition Google or any other search engine to say, I know you can't remove this from whatever site that has the information on there, but can you remove it from the results of the search engine like Google? Because again, Google is just a search engine. It works on an algorithm, right? So for example, if I were to type in Daryl, Gilliard, sorry, misspelled it. So if I were to type this in and learn that this person named Dale Gilliard, of which there apparently are many, that there's this pastor, right? Baptist pastor, who actually admitted to and confessed to abusing two women in the Baptist church, right, in Texas and Oklahoma. The fact that we're able to find this article in the Houston Chronicle means that he doesn't have the right to be forgotten, in the sense that this article, this information still occurs. In 2008, he was convicted of sex crimes while working as a non-Southern Baptist church in Jacksonville, Florida. So, do we want to know this? Well, I think a lot of people would say yes. I want to know if there's someone either in my community or my church who's been convicted of this kind of crime, right? He admitted to molesting two girls. This is updated last year by Janice Harris, who, remember, this is Jacksonville, Florida, who's a reporter there in Florida. But yeah, I would think that, we might want to know this information, right? and he's currently registered as a sex offender in Florida. Would you want to know that? If you click that link, it should take you to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, where they keep on file, on record, people who are registered sex offenders, right? And where they live, because they're required to report their whereabouts to federal law enforcement, right? So, right, address, there's the address, and there's a map. So, what do you think? Should someone like that have, right here, the right to be forgotten? Maybe, maybe not. You could argue it differently. But that's something that we don't really have automatically in the US, whereas in the European Union, they do. That all you have to do is write a letter, say, I want this information removed, and they have to do it, right? So those are some possible topics for you folks for essay number 2, essay number 2 that is due March 21st. It's in module 4. And later today, I will be posting this inside of module 4 in the video lecture link. All right, that's it, folks. Hope you stay warm and are well, and take care. Bye.